Alan is the author of two recent New York Times best-selling books, including his recent release, Live and Let Die, which chronicles the ongoing battle between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf, as well as his 2022 book, Phil, the rip-roaring and unauthorized biography of golf's most colorful superstar. He's also written 7 other previous books in the past. I've been trying to connect with Alan for several months, and we were finally able to make it happen over the weekend, so check it out. Here's my interview with Alan Shipnuck to kick off 2024 in style here on This Week in Golf on NewsTalk Sauga 960. Well, Alan, let's start with the big news of the week. Rory McIlroy was on a podcast and made some comments softening his stance against LIV. Just surprisingly, then Phil Mickelson came to his defense. Your thoughts on Rory changing his tune, as well as Phil kind of backing him up, calling a truce?
Yeah, it tells me that the deal's probably going to get consummated sooner rather than later, and Rory knows it, and so he's trying to get ahead of it. But I give Rory credit. It's never easy to admit publicly that you've made a mistake, and that maybe you've been wrong, and maybe you've been stubborn, and a little strident. And I think Rory's evolution maybe can be a bellwether for other people in the game and maybe golf fans. And Phil extending the olive branch. These are all good signs for people who want to see the game come back together and sort of be reunified. So, um, obviously, the way the framework agreement came down and the secrecy, Rory felt betrayed and blindsided, and probably rightfully so. And it's taken him, 6 months essentially to process it all. And I think he's finally made peace with it. And the comments were a reflection of that.
So, well, obviously, you have this notorious relationship with Phil Mickelson. Take me back to the beginning. Do you remember the first time you met Phil, and what was your relationship like at the start?
The first time, I mean, I think it was 1994, the Honda Classic. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, Phil's a complicated character, and he's sort of a master manipulator of the media. And so it's always been an interesting relationship. He's gone out of his way to court a lot of writers. He takes them out to dinner. He's played golf with them. I was never kind of part of that that inner circle, which I think actually served me well. You can see things a little more clearly when you keep someone at arm's length. We had our ups and downs, but continue to do so. He's a wild card. I mean, he's an unpredictable, sort of volatile personality. He's very smart. He's probably not as smart as he thinks he is. And so Phil's talked his way in and out of many jams through the years, and continues to do so. I mean, on some level, he's going to be vindicated by the way this all plays out. Some of his core criticisms of the PGA Tour was that the players didn't have enough of a say in their own governance. That was proven to be very true, and they've been working hard behind the scenes to change that. The Tigers and the Patrick Cantlays. He felt like the players were not getting paid enough, and that the tour was sitting on too much money. And as soon as Liv arrived, they opened the spigot, and the players of their salaries have essentially doubled. So I think Phil was right about a lot of things. He's also been wrong on plenty of them, and sometimes it was more how he said it than what he actually said, and it rubbed people the wrong way. So he's a fascinating character. I mean, I think he's the most interesting golfer of this era, and continues to be.
In 2022, you wrote Phil, the Rip Roaring and Unauthorized Biography. Can you lay out the process behind the book as far as research, and then how many people did you interview surrounding Phil before you actually put pen to paper?
Well, I mean, it was really 30 years in the making. It was a lifetime. It was a career of following the guy, and talking to him and people around him. But when I decided to do the book, I had all that to draw upon, but I did hundreds of new interviews um, to go deeper. That was the fun part that was the challenge. Was I knew the Phil Mickelson story, but I was also aware that it ran a lot deeper, and there were more layers to peel back. And so, of course, the more people you talk to, the more you learn. And you keep circling back to the people close to him and other sources. And as you learn more, then they'll tell you more, because they know you're getting close to the heart of the story. So it was an interesting reporting challenge, for sure. And um, you know, writing the book was a condensed period, but I'd been thinking about Phil and observing Phil and interacting with Phil, going back to the mid '90s.
So Chris McKee joined by Alan Shipnuck. So Alan's latest book, Live and Let Die, was released back in October, details the battle ongoing between the PGA Tour and LIV. Can you remember the first time you heard about this new fledgling league and your initial thoughts about someone trying to compete with the PGA Tour?
Yeah, I mean, I lay it all out in the book. The precursor to Live Golf was the Premier Golf League, the PGL, and it had its roots in the mid 2000 teens, and they started talking to people, and it really became public in 2018. And I kind of dismissed it. It just seemed like they were never going to be able to get the players. In the FedEx Cup era had arrived, and the players were playing for more and more money. Um, and on the PGA Tour, and the people behind the Premier Golf League were sort of unknown in the golf world. It was this London lawyer named Andy Gardner who kind of dreamed it up, and he was just a golf fan, just noodling in a notebook. And but he was a smart guy, and he was well connected, and he kept pursuing it and talking to more people. And that was when the buzz began. I mean, I really tuned into it early COVID. So spring of 2020, that's when the Premier Golf League was making this big push to forge an alliance with the European Tour. And that felt like a true potential competitor if they could bring this new product, this new energy, this new format, revitalize the European Tour, give that tour a way to bring home some of its wayward stars and maybe attract some American talent. Like that could have been an interesting competitor to the PGA Tour. It's kind of one of the great what ifs now in golf history. If they've been able to consummate that deal, how much things would have changed. Um, because it was the Premier Golf League who brought the Saudis to the table. They secured this promise from the Public Investment Fund for $500 million to help fund it. And when the deal with the European Tour fell apart, the Saudis lost faith in the Premier Golf League's leadership, and they decided to go at it alone. I mean, that's really an important moment in this entire timeline that is not widely known or understood. So, um, yeah, so I heard about the Premier Golf League before I heard about Live Golf, and there was this whole period of confusion when the Saudis had broken from the PGL, but nobody really knew it, and they were recruiting players, and it wasn't clear, was it for their own thing, was it for the PGL? And so that was one of the mandates of this book, was of Live and Let Die, was to bring all this stuff out into the open, and so golf fans, stakeholders in the game could really understand how we got to this moment.
So one of the people you spoke to for Live and Let Die was Keith Pelly, commissioner of the DP Tour and a good Canadian lad. Do you think the DP Tour made a mistake partnering with the PGA Tour instead of Live? Because Live approached them, from what I understand, initially, and they decided to make that alliance with the PGA Tour instead.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to, and I like Keith Pelly a lot. I think he's a good guy, and he's smart, and he's been more intimately involved in all of this than people really knew. Um, because he was sort of the concierge for Jay Monahan, excuse me, on the PGA Tour. He was negotiating with the Saudis. He was negotiating with the PGL. He was in the middle of a lot of stuff, and very knowledgeable source. And so um, one of the problems that Pele had was for the European Tour to reshape itself in such a radical fashion, they would have needed 75% of the membership to vote for it. And the tour extends voting rights to past members. So they have a bunch of old farts who aren't even active players who still have a vote. And these guys are staunch traditionalists, and they they were probably never going to go for wholesale change that would have come with the Premier Golf League. And so he really had to sort of forge this alliance with the PGA Tour, which made sense on a lot of ways. They'd been competitors, now they're collaborators, and that's had a lot of benefits for the European Tour as far as ramping up purses and sort of this long-term sustainability, elevating some of the events. Like the Scottish Open is now essentially a PGA Tour event, and so a lot of the Americans go there and play, and there's more world ranking points. And um, the European Tour was running out of money during COVID, and Pelly did what he had to do to ensure its survival, and that was his partnership with the PGA Tour. But um, he because of the governance structure, he wasn't really allowed to swing for the fences. I think he made the most of what was a complex situation. And now the European Tour is going to be better capitalized than ever before because they are part of this investment, whether it's comes from the Saudis or it comes from, private equity or Wall Street money. The European Tour is going to enjoy that. So they're going to be in a much stronger position than they've ever been financially. So I think in a very narrow sense, the job of Keith Pelley and Jay Monahan is to get their players paid, and they both have done that. There's been some strife; it's come at a cost, but they've been really effective in raising the purses, and that's what their players care about.
Chris McKee, joined by Alan Shipnuck, the author of Live and Let Die. So, Alan, one of the reasons I was a little bit more open to Live initially is I'm maybe perhaps a little bit more politically astute than your average, sports writer, and I understand the long-lasting relationship between the American government and the Saudis. Does the book go into any detail about that, kind of the political background of how basically every president in the United States has been in bed with the Saudis for a long time?
Oh yeah, chapter 5 of the book goes really deep on all of that, and it's been interesting because it's a golf book without that much golf. It's really about money, power, politics, vengeance, betrayal, greed. Like it's these big Shakespearean themes, and there's a lot of diversions. And I've been interested because a lot of readers have told me that that was the chapter that they took the most from because it to understand how we got to this moment where Saudi Arabia is investing so much money into professional golf, you need to understand these alliances that you're referring to and all of the complications that come with it, the road to 9/11 and Saudi's role in that, the rise of MBS, the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Like, why is Saudi Arabia trying to launder its reputation? I mean, you need to know how we got to this moment, and so I trace all of that, and it's fascinating stuff that I don't think is widely understood by large segments of the American population and the global population. So yeah, it was an interesting challenge. I mean, I interviewed ambassadors and experts, and I read a million books, and I read the 9/11 Commission report, back to front twice, and it was an education for me. And then to try and make it accessible to the average reader, and to try and place it in the context of this larger story. I mean, it was a fun and interesting challenge. I'll say that.
You talk about the majority of the general public not being aware. Certainly, everyone on my Twitter timeline, I think fits that mold. Kind of, any comment I make about Live, they all dive in. But speaking of Twitter, I want to go back. So back in late November, you tweeted that quote: "In recent days, Phil has been telling folks that Rom signing with Live is a done deal. They share the same agent," unquote. And then Phil responds, basically, "This isn't true. Alan is the worst liar and a pathetic human," unquote. How personally satisfying to you was it when it was announced that John Rahm had in fact signed with Liv?
I mean, it was just classic Phil bullshittery. I mean, and it's so transparent. It's easy to blow it off because it's ridiculous. He was telling a lot of people that. A lot of people in the game know that to be true. Um, he got some pushback from his bosses at Live Golf because they've been trying to keep everything confidential, and they've made a lot of players sign NDAs and all this. And so that was just Phil trying to cover his behind. But it was, of course, everyone. As soon as Rom signed, there was a lot of discourse about how duplicitous Phil had been, and these things he does, it just sort of backfire. It's so obvious that what I had said was true because I heard it from people who heard it directly from Phil, and a lot of people had heard it from Phil, and for him to push back like that, it was just yeah. When Rom signed, it was just an eye roll, basically. That's probably the easiest way to say it.
Well, Chris McKee, joined by Alan Shipnuck. So, Alan, I mean, aside from Phil, you've received criticism from a number of PGA Tour players over the years. Do you see that as a badge of honor, or does it kind of get in the way with what you're trying to do?
Both. I mean, I don't know if a number. It anyway, whatever. That's semantics. But yeah, there's definitely pushback,
Well, I
and
saw Justin Thomas and then
yeah,
Phil.
yeah,
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 Justin for sure.
yeah.
He's an interesting character. I mean, the you can't take on a big controversial topic like this battle for the soul of professional golf and try and tunnel really deep into the story and tell it in a really honest, unflinching way and not expect there to be some ruffled feathers and some critiques. So it kind of comes with the territory. Um, the thing that's irksome is that a lot of people, like Justin, for instance, he didn't even read the book. I don't even know he read the excerpt. He's just reacting to a tweet. So you have a 100,000 word book and you have a 4,000 word excerpt, but his commentary is based on a 3 sentence tweet. It's like there's not a lot of due diligence there. That's the frustrating part because I put so much care into the work and you pour your life into this book, and then these tour pros kind of pop off without taking the time to read it and really being fully informed. So, but I guess that's just modern life. Everyone has a knee-jerk opinion that they spew on social media, and it's they don't really take the time to understand the issues in a deeper level. So I mostly just kind of blow it off. But we're all human, and sometimes you feel the slings and arrows. But um, it's been interesting because, like, after the Phil book came out, people said to me, "Oh, are PGA Tour players not talking to you now because of the things that Phil has said?" I said, "No, it's the opposite. Like that increased my credibility with the players because they, they had known there was this divide between the public and private Phil, and they were gratified that someone kind of finally just told it like it was." And it wasn't just players. I had agents, caddies, wives come up to me and say, "Thank you for writing that book. Someone needed to do that." And so um, sometimes the reaction is not what people think it might be.
One thing I've been skeptical about since day one is the TGL Simulator League. Do you think this thing ever gets off the ground? I mean, we know we've been postponed to 2025, and
Yeah, the people behind that have been mad at me because I said from the beginning, this sounds like kind of a turkey. I just don't see it. Um, and now it's obviously been a whole catastrophic delay, and it's quite a metaphor for the air coming out of the stadium. Um, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, people watch YouTube videos of just random dudes playing golf all the time. That, like, whether it's good or it's other new media outlets. I think there's an appetite for that, but the problem, it's neither fish nor fowl. It's kind of like it's professional golfers, but they're not really playing real golf. Like it's almost, I don't see it, but maybe there's a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds out there who think it's going to be cool and they'll support it. But um, there's too much money invested and there's too much star power behind it for it not to at least launch. Whether it succeeds long term is unknown, but it will certainly launch next year because the Tigers and the Rorys and all the investors are not going to let it just fizzle out. Not yet.
well, Chris McKee, joined by Alan Shipnuck, author of Live and Let Die. So, Alan, we're here on Sauga 960, which is in the Toronto area and the RBC Canadian Open, obviously in our neck of the woods. It wasn't included in the PGA Tour's elevated event schedule. I mean, what do you think that says about the future of the Canadian Open?
It's not great. I mean, that's part of the problem of this new world order professional golf. It's always existed in golf. There was kind of different tiers of tournaments, and um, you knew some were going to attract all the stars and some were going to struggle to get any of, and then there was some in the middle that their fortunes would change year to year. Um, the elevated events just kind of codified that, like, these are the big events and nothing else matters, and that's a problem that the tour is going to have to address. I mean, they are going to shop that elevated event around. And hopefully the Canadian Open will get a turn. But um, even then, if it's once every 4, 5, 6 years, like, is that enough to elevate the event? I mean, you hope. I live near Pebble Beach, and so Pebble has struggled for years to attract top players. It's elevated this year. You hope a bunch of guys come. They love the courses. Their wives love the restaurants and the shopping and the spas, and the kids have a great time in nature. And they say, you know what, I'm going to come back again no matter what, even if it's not elevated. Like, that's the dream, is guys come to the tournament and they realize they want to support it, even if that elevated status disappears. But um, it's unknown.
Well, last time you were up in Canada for the Canadian Open, or have you ever even been up for the Canadian Open?
Yeah, only once. I mean, God, 20 years ago. It's been a really long time. I would definitely like to get back, and I don't cover as many tournaments as I used to. There was in the rip roaring days of print media when there was sort of endless. travel budgets, I would go to 20 or 25 tournaments, but these days it's mostly the majors, the Ryder Cup, maybe the Olympics this year. It's much more consolidated. So, but never say never. I mean, uh, I've taken family trips. I love the Canadian Rockies. I'm a big fan I love Montreal. I love Toronto. I love Vancouver. Like I'm always looking for a reason to get to Canada. It just hasn't happened in a while.
So I know you had your issue with LIV in the London press conference. I've covered the Canadian Open since 2017, and they refused me credentials this year because Sauga 960 is the only radio station in North America that airs LIV. And then, so I was a little frustrated. I didn't get my credentials. And then the day of the RBC Canadian Open happened was the announcement of the merger, which was kind of funny. And so I ended up not necessarily as gratifying as the John Rahm situation, but certainly
Yeah. I mean, that's so petty. I mean, like for the tour to do that, but it tells you how personal this whole battle became. And so yeah, that's an interesting little nugget. I like that. I might use that at some point. But yeah, we've that's been something that we've all had to navigate. I was going back and forth, sort of traveling on two passports between the PGA Tour and Live Golf to report this book. And every time I'd show up on one tour, someone would complain about something I'd written about the other tour. Like, and that's how I knew I probably did a good job on the book. Is I've been accused of being a PGA Tour shill and a Live, being in the pocket of Live by both camps. So I've tried to stay down the middle and just tell both stories in a real and honest way. And if both sides are mad at you, I think that you've done a pretty good job at it.
Well, Chris McKee joined by Alan Shipnuck. Last question, Alan. I can't thank you enough for your time. And so, I'm sure you're kind of blue in the face talking about it, but what do you see the landscape of pro golf in 2025? How do you see this kind of shaping up together?
It's a coin flip right now. I mean, what the tour is trying to do is thread the needle where they keep the Saudis in the deal, but they reduce their equity and their influence, and they become minority investors essentially alongside this other group that's come through with U.S. based money. And that would, of course, be great for the tour. They'd get more money. They would eliminate the Saudis as fierce competitors. They could reunify the game. But the public investment fund never takes a minority position in a deal. They want to be dominant. And that's why these negotiations have bogged down. And so at some point, the tour is going to have to decide, if if they can if they can get this outside investment with American money, then the congressional scrutiny goes away. It'll make a lot of fans and players happy, but Live becomes this fierce rival again. And so they've got it's a very hard decision they're facing here, and they burned up a lot of goodwill. So as close as I've been to this, and as many people as I've talked to who are in the deal and they're in the room, it's not clear what's going to happen yet. It's really not. And so it's just going to be a cliffhanger as this negotiation drags on. But um, one thing is certain: the players are going to make a lot more money. There's going to be more golf to watch, which is good for fans. But how long will the unhappiness and the bitterness and the dissatisfaction linger? That's really the question, because a lot of fans have anecdotally have kind of given up on professional golf in the short term. And can the game win them back? And that remains unknown. But I'll say this: if I was a 12-year-old kid, I'd be working on my short game right now, because it's never been a better time to be a professional golfer, and it's just going to keep going. But yeah, it's how it plays out is going to be fascinating, but it remains very delicate.
Well, Alan, can't thank you enough for your time. Really appreciate it. Of course, you can get Live and Let Die at most major book outlets, Amazon. Anything else in the pipeline you're working on that we can plug while I got you?
No, I mean, there's a few things I'm working on, but it's a little premature. But I'm excited about both projects, so I'll keep you posted. Put it that way.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So there you have it, my conversation with Alan Shipnuck. So grateful for him to give me some time. We went back and forth for weeks trying to make that happen, and finally able to track him down, and can't thank him enough. You can find Alan on Twitter at Alan Shipnuck, and of course, go check out one of his 9 books available on Amazon and most major bookstores across North America, including his most recent release, Live and Let Die. I'm Chris McKee. Don't forget, drop me a follow on Twitter at Mr. McKee, and subscribe to This Week in Golf in podcast version on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, or wherever it is you prefer to listen to your podcasts. You're listening to This Week in Golf on NewsTalk Sauga 960.